everybody. My name's Stan Steindl. Welcome to the 8th Compassion Symposium. Hooray! We're very proud to have our 8th year running the Compassion Symposium and tonight's Keynote Address. But first I'd like to introduce Auntie Kathryn Fisher, who's an Aboriginal elder who was born on and grew up on Turrbal Aboriginal Reserve. She now lives in Brisbane, where she's linked to the Turrbal people through kinship ties. Auntie Kathryn has a strong spiritual connection to her people, land and traditions. She's here today on behalf of and with the blessing of Turrbal elder Songwoman Marucci to deliver the welcome to country. Auntie Kathryn.
Thank you. Just a brief about myself. My name is Dr Stan Fisher. I was born and raised on an Aboriginal mission called Turrbal. And Turrbal was made up of about approximately 50 different language groups. I mean, they were brought in over the years from all different areas, from the north, south, east and west. I come from a family of 15, 10 brothers. Imagine that. I came along, I'm number 9 down the line, and I spoiled and upset their apple cart anyways. And, but my father's mother was a stolen child with her little brother from the Georgetown district in far north Queensland. And his father was stolen from the creek up at Nebo, along with other children who were in the creek playing around. So all these children were being stolen throughout Australia and taken away from their mothers, and from their language group, from their language, and from their own laws and traditions. So imagine if your child was stolen from you and taken, you never saw him again. Well, that's happened with many of our families. With the Turrbal nation here, originally, when the colonisers came, they kind of coexisted with them, with the Turrbal people. And then when the soldiers were brought in, they decided they needed to get rid of them. So they slaughtered many of them. And those they didn't slaughter, some have died through the introduction of alcohol and diseases they brought in from overseas. There were some good people, compassionate humanitarians in the mid-1800s. And that's what this symposium is about, is compassion. So these people showed compassion and decided to take them north out of this area, because the Turrbal people have 5 clan groups within the greater Brisbane area, both north and south of the Brisbane River. And my sister Marucci, her great-great-grandfather was the chief of the Brisbane River tribes. So I was just sitting out there before and looking at the environment, and I thought, this place must have been utterly beautiful, because Brisbane was subtropical before it became raised for, what it is today. And I thought, how beautiful is our country? When you sit and take a moment of looking at what would have been there. And I was looking out there with a new development with a creek or a pond and a lot of sand there. And I thought, is that a volleyball court? Or is it just somewhere for people to sit? But Turrbal people, they ended up on Turrbal. It used to be called Baramba in its early years. I'm carrying sandalwood because this is one of the bush, I found it outside, that we use for smoking ceremonies. My mother did. And it's from her country, with Western Queensland. She was a Yemen and Gungari woman, and her father was a Dungibara Barunga man from southeast Queensland here. So we all came, and they brought us to Walker country, all people from all over. Bulkari Maramba Mianjin, Wadamayanaman, Kuyan Jinjau Yari, Yariang Chiba, Yariang, Diragam, Daya, Yana Biki, Kabatul Jagan. In other words, welcome to the land of the Turrbal people. Wherever you walk in the lands here, you're walking in the footprints of the ancestors, where they did their song and dance and their ceremonies. You can feel their spirit if you're in tune with them. If you're in tune with the land, you will feel the spirits of those ancestors. No matter where you go throughout Australia, you'll walk in the footprints of the traditional custodians of the land. The custodians, their ancestral spirits, will always remain there. Manda Barita Morayanaman, Manda Barita Morayanaman, Manda Barita Morayanaman means blessings to you. Blessings to you and your family. And blessings for your compassion. Not enough is out there, but you people are beautiful. I love people. I love life. I think people are ultimately wonderful. Sure, you have the riffraff, no matter which race. You'll always get them. But I love people. And I love yous. I don't know yous. Unless you do me wrong, you know. And then you'll see the good side of me again. But I'm going to leave you with a beautiful crockery song. That one of the whole men that was taken off his country, it was a Kabi man, and he was taken from his land near the Sunshine Coast area. His name was going for the Warden. And when he used to sit around his own fire with his family, he used to sing, he made this song, The Crobby Up, about him wanting to go home to his own country, to go and sit down in his own bora, in his own ceremonial ground. And quite often when the white officials came and visited the mission, our men would have to paint up and do a performance for many visitors throughout the years. And usually the crobberies, this isn't the only one, there were other crobberies as well. And they also brought them down here to the Brisbane Exhibition Ground to show in the early times for our men used to be brought down here. Of course, we were the nearest mission to a major city. So we were always, you know, the one they looked at for everything. Even the tourists used to come through Sherbrooke. And as a kid, we used to chase the buses around, the tourist buses, and because they'd throw lollies out the window at us, and that was nice. We loved lollies. But it wasn't until my mother said to the boss, "Hey, bosses, this has got to stop. We're not monkeys in a zoo. Cut the tourists." You know, we were there as show ponies for the government, you know. Our men, our dancers, the mission. But we didn't know, you know, as children, you don't know all these things about the implications until you grow older, about racism and all that. And when we were allowed to go to high school, because that was forbidden, because most of our parents before us and my brothers and them only went to what they call 4th grade, which I think is equivalent to year 7 today. So, and then they were sent out to work. They're boys, girls, and quite often they were sent to stations to work. A lot of our women were violated on those stations. But going back to Grandfather Wyden, when he used to sing this, he was trying to actually tell them that he wanted to go home to his own country. He wanted to go home and sit down in his own bora. And you may have heard this before. It's, as I said, it's a crockery song. I'm not a singer by no means. But his song gives me strength to sing it. And every time I sing it, I think about him. And I want to sing him home to his own country, where he can rest, his spirit can be. And hopefully, I mean, he's had many people sing it. He must be there, he must be getting sick and tired of this. I'm going home, I'm going home. But, you know, with these blessings, I hope I can deliver it to you. Garini nanami, juju bubi rono. Garini nanami, garini nanami, juju bubi rono. Garini nanami, juju bubi rono. Garini nanami, juju bubi rono. Gaya mamaranya, Gaya mamaranya, jagan gunganyongo. Gaya mamaranya, jagan gunganyongo. Gaya mamaranya, jagan gunganyongo. Garinanami, garinanami, juju bubirono. Garinanami, juju bubirono. Garinanami, juju bubirono. Ay. Thank you and have a wonderful time tonight. I have to leave you now. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Auntie Kathryn. That was very beautiful. And it reminded me that I love you all too. And actually, could everyone just raise your hands and we'll just do a little selfie? Hey! It's going straight to the pool room. All right. But so now I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Marcela Matos. There you go. I've known Marcela since about 2016, but I've known of Marcela for much longer than that, as many of you may very well as well. She's an incredible compassion researcher from the University of Coimbra, originally mentored by her professors José Pinto Gavea and Paul Gilbert. And since then, quite literally, has made a prolific contribution to this area of research. But she's also an excellent teacher, trainer, and a therapist. We're all in for a real treat tonight. So, without further ado, I bring you Marcela Matos.
Hello. Can you hear me fine? Yeah? I'm so excited to be here. So today, I thought I would take you through my personal and research journey from easing suffering to awakening flourishing, all under the beaming light of compassion. But first, I would like to thank Dr. Stan Steindl and Dr. James Kirby. Where are you, James? There you are. For this prestigious invitation, which I was so honored by and humbled to accept. It's a true delight, a true pleasure to be here, and I deeply admire you and the work that you do here at UQ and the Compassionate Mind Research Group. Not only you are incredible human beings, but you are compassion legends and heroes. And yeah, you are world leaders here at UQ. You're doing most amazing work at the forefront of compassion science. And thank you also for the wonderful contributions that you've been bringing to the field. And this is where I come from. I come from the other side of the world, a city, a university city called Coimbra, right in the center of Portugal. And this is the School of Psychology of the University of Coimbra, where I work at the Center for Research in Neuropsychology and Cognitive Behavioral Intervention. So today, I'm going to take you through the intertwining of my research and my personal journey from shame to compassion. So let's start with my personal journey. So this is the canvas. Back in 2015, it was called the Happy Cafe. It's a cafe. It used to be in East London, and unfortunately it closed doors after the pandemic. And it was a cafe that provided free food and coffee for people who were struggling. And back in 2015, I decided to go to this cafe, even though I don't drink coffee, unlike most of you. I drink tea, but I decided to go there to have some coffee. And I love the place. So it had these walls. You can see a little bit here that were just covered in questions about, for example, what is your happy place? What is the most positive memory from your childhood? And right where, in front of the table where I sat, this was the question up on the wall. What is your superhero power? And as I was looking through the answers, look what I found. I found that, can you see what it's written there? I can make my hands sweat on command. Me too. So that's what I wrote there. I didn't take a photo, but I wrote there, me too. And this moment was pivotal for me, because in this was the first moment in my life where I realized that this vulnerability of mine that throughout all my life, I saw as some kind of imperfection, a defect, something that made me feel ashamed in many instances, was not only shared by someone else, but it was seen by someone else as a superpower. So in that moment, I think it was the first time I was able to reframe what I perceived back then as my greatest vulnerability as a superpower. Because I could see in that moment how much this bodily idiosyncrasy of mine, something that I didn't choose, taught me so much throughout my life. It taught me to accept and celebrate our imperfections, my imperfections. It taught me about the importance of being accepted, understood, and validated by other people. It taught me about the importance of tolerating suffering, of tolerating what's uncomfortable, because sweating from the palms of your hands and your feet, it's very uncomfortable. And it also taught me about courage, and about the courage that you need to actually go and face things that are difficult in order to pursue goals and things that are important to you in your life. So yeah, this is how I arrived to compassion. Because if it weren't for compassion that I received from my family, from my parents, from my friends, and that I learned to give myself, I wouldn't be here today. Because I believe that it lies in the dark side of our humanity, the callous side of our humanity, in our shame, in our suffering, in our anxiety, in our anger. It is there that the power of compassion lies, because it's there, it's in the suffering that compassion may blossom and may flourish. And now, on to my research journey, which also took me from shame to compassion. And so it all started in 1999. Yes, I'm that old. When I started my undergraduate course in psychology, this is Professor José Pinto Gouveia. He was my mentor, my PhD supervisor, and he was the one who first told me and taught me about shame and compassion. And so in 2005, I read this book by Paul Gilbert and Bernice Andrews on shame. And then in 2006, I met Paul when he came to Portugal, and I did my first training in compassion-focused therapy, which actually was about shame and self-criticism. And it was then that I knew. So I knew I had this special interest on shame, for reasons that you now are aware of. But I was also very interested in looking at that from a different perspective. So with José and Paul, I decided to study shame experiences and shame memories during my PhD. So this is what I looked at. So I investigated whether shame and early shame experiences, how did they operate in your memory? And what is the impact that these experiences that you have throughout your life have on your mental health and well-being? But before I go on to that, what is shame? So if you think about a recent shame experience that you might have had, or an older shame experience, you will very intuitively understand that shame is a very powerful self-conscious emotion and is also a socially focused emotion. It's an emotion all about how we exist in the minds of other people. And it involves feelings of inferiority, defectiveness, powerlessness, unattractiveness, or self-consciousness. And these feelings come along with these behaviors, these urges, these desires to disappear, to hide ourselves away, or to conceal our deficiencies. So shame has been regarded as a particularly intense and often incapacitating emotion, and described by several authors as one of the most powerful, painful, and potentially destructive human experiences, because it has a transdiagnostic impact on our mental health and well-being. And according to an evolutionary biopsychosocial model of shame, which was conceptualized by Professor Paul Gilbert, shame actually has an adaptive function. Shame evolved from our socially competitive motives to appear attractive in the eyes of others. Shame emerges from the fact that we as human beings are a self-aware, identity-forming, and highly social species. And for us, one of the most important things is that other people value us, that other people love us, that other people accept us, that other people choose us to be their partners, to be their friends, to be their allies, to be their lovers, to be their colleagues. So this is key for us, this need to appear attractive in the minds of others and to be thought of positively and fondly by others. So from an evolutionary perspective, shame is this warning signal, this warning emotional state that emerges when we believe that others might be viewing us in a negative way. And if they do view us in a negative way, what that means is that they may criticize us, judge us, humiliate us, reject us, persecute us, or even attack us. And if you think about our evolutionary history when we lived in small tribes, small groups, if we were ostracized, if we were rejected, excluded from a group, we would very likely struggle to survive and we would lose access to very important resources. So this is the story of shame in an evolutionary way. So even though it has this evolutionary, very important function, shame can have a very pathogenic impact on our mental health. And an array of studies conducted all over the world have shown that this aversive and stressful experience that represents this threat to our social relationships changes one's mental state. There's a very nice study from Naomi Eisenberger and Matthew Lieberman that shows that shame activates the same neuronal regions in our brain that physical pain does, that the suffering component of physical pain does. And they call this study rejection hurts. Because actually for humans, during our evolution, it was very important that our minds, our brains were able to identify very quickly if we were being rejected or criticized by others. So shame has a huge impact on our mental health, well-being, and it comes along with an array of body and physiological responses. And so the research I conducted during my PhD looked at this. So looked at how early shame experiences operate as shame memories and as painful shame memories. And what we found is that just like any other trauma, like if you think about, imagine a car accident or being assaulted, robbed, mugged on the street, shame memories elicit the same kind of trauma-like qualities in your mind. So they come along with intrusive symptoms, with repetitive thoughts and feelings about the event. They come along with avoidance, you want to avoid, anything to do with the shame experience. They come along with hyperarousal symptoms, so you will feel easily startled, angry, anxious. And they create this sense of an ongoing threat to one's sense of self and psychological integrity. And not only that happens, and there's a huge impact on our well-being and how we come to believe we exist in the minds of others, but also shame can become central to our self-identity. What does this mean? Is that when we have these experiences, they can start to define how we see ourselves. They, in a way, shape who we are, or at least who we believe we are in our own eyes and in the eyes of others. And because of this, these shame memories that are traumatic and then become central to one's identity, they have a huge impact throughout our lives, and they magnify our risk for depressive symptoms, anxiety, stress, and they also increase our propensity to then experience shame as adults. Not only that, but we also found when we looked at the origins of fears of compassion, which actually we know that compassion is the most important antidote to shame and social connection. So when we looked at the origins of fears of compassion, we found that shame memories are an important part of the origins of these resistances, these fears of receiving care, compassion, and love from others and from oneself. And so this is what we call the double bind of shame, because not only shame increases our vulnerability to psychological distress, but it also blocks us. It also reduces our openness to seek and receive support and care from others, and this is what we need to actually heal from shame. So shame experiences can leave deep scars in the self and can be encoded in our autobiographical memory as powerful traumas, damaging one's most cherished and inner sense of identity and humanity, and influencing one's psychological well-being throughout life. My next question, as I started to research these and come across these findings, is actually, we all have these experiences, so why? For some of us, they don't seem to be so toxic. What can protect us against shame? So amongst several things, we looked at compassion. And we found in these 3 studies, the first of one was conducted in collaboration here with Dr. Stan Steindl and one of our, Alison Creed, one of our honor students. We found that self-compassion actually buffers, it protects us against the negative impacts of shame on our mental health and well-being. And that is true if we look at a generally community population, as in the case of the first study, but it's also true if we think about women and, for example, eating disorders, psychopathology, or in a study where we explore this in gay men. So our skills and abilities to be compassionate towards oneself in the face of life difficulties may help to reduce the painful negative effects of shame memories on psychological well-being and promote feelings of safeness and contentment. So this is where I came to compassion, when I arrived to compassion, and my path actually crossed with compassion. And it was when I shifted my research focus from shame to compassion as a way of healing suffering, but also of promoting flourishing. And we are aware of the multiple benefits of compassion. These are just examples of the array of studies that are out there showing that compassion has a huge impact, a positive impact on your mental health and well-being. And there are also a number of books you might recognize, a few renowned here authors that you might know that have been pointing out to the huge benefits that compassion has for mental health, our physiology, emotional regulation, social connection, pro-social behavior, coping with stress and adversity, positive parenting styles, healthcare, and I could go on. But what is compassion? What exactly is compassion? If we think about the word compassion, a lot of words that we associate with compassion can come to our minds. And even though this has been a field that has been researched for at least 20 years now, there's no agreement amongst theorists about what compassion is. In compassion-focused therapy, and me personally, I follow this definition of compassion that is based on a Dalai Lama definition of compassion, a Buddhist definition by Paul Gilbert that says that compassion is a sensitivity to suffering in oneself and in others that comes along with a deep commitment to try to alleviate or prevent that suffering. So compassion is not the same as love, is not the same as pity, it has nothing to do with being weak, being self-indulgent, of submitting to the will of others. Compassion is about courage. Compassion is about the courage that we need to notice suffering, engage with suffering instead of running away from it, and then be able to engage in wise and helpful action towards the alleviation or the prevention of suffering. So compassion has these two key components. One is the sensitivity to suffering. The other one is this commitment to try to alleviate and prevent suffering. And they correspond to what we call the compassion algorithm, which is based on the caring motivation algorithm that says that we need, our minds need a way of actually detecting a stimuli, in this case suffering, so we need to be able to notice and engage with suffering instead of dismissing it or ignoring it. And then we also need an ability to actually respond to that stimuli, in this case, making this commitment to engage in wise and committed action. And then compassion has three key qualities. The first is wisdom, developing the wisdom, the understanding about how our minds work, that we're all evolved human beings, that we are product of evolution, we are shaped by social contexts, and this wisdom also comes with this non-judgmental way of looking at us, the world, and others. And another key quality of compassion is courage and strength. Paul Gilbert has a saying that I love that says, compassion is the courage to descend to the reality of human suffering. We need courage to be able to engage with suffering and do something about suffering. And finally, caring commitment. So compassion involves action. Thich Nhat Hanh has another saying that I love that says, compassion is a verb. And for me, this says everything about this caring commitment because it means that compassion means action, compassionate action, do something about suffering. And compassion is not one single thing. It's not only, as I was saying earlier, being kind and soft and nice. No, compassion, the way compassion is expressed and manifested, and the way we see it out there in our everyday life can take many forms. And these forms that compassion can take are dependent on the context and what the context requires from us in order for us to have compassionate behavior in a certain situation. And another important idea that we need to stress is these flows of compassion. So compassion can be directed in different directions. Apologies for the repetition. But so we can be compassionate towards others. We can direct compassion towards ourselves. And we can also be open to receive compassion, care, support from others. So one of the questions we had actually was, and this was a study that I conducted with also Stan Steindl, Paul Gilbert, and other students of ours, was looking at exactly what is compassion. And we looked at this in a sample that we collected in Australia, Portugal, and Singapore. And we tried to understand actually what words do people associate with compassion and self-compassion. And we found some differences in these semantic associations that we thought that they were interesting. So even though you will see there are some differences between the three countries on the top words, the top three words that people associate with compassion, the top words that overall people from these three countries associate with compassion are empathy, kindness, and understanding. And when we look at self-compassion, we found that the top three words were acceptance, strength, and understanding. We also explored, in another study, cultural differences in the flows of compassion and also in fears of compassion. And we found differences between Australians and Singaporeans in the flows of compassion. However, the associations between the flows of compassion and the psychological outcomes were not different. What this means is that even though between countries the way these flows are expressed may vary, this doesn't mean that compassion has a different impact on our well-being. And actually, despite these cultural differences, there is research that shows that compassion has a universal protective effect. And some of that data has come out of our multinational compassion and COVID-19 project, where we set up a multinational project to explore this question. Right in the beginning of the pandemic in March 2020, can compassion protect us against the negative impacts of such a global, invisible, never before experienced threat? And this is what we looked at. So we set up a multinational consortium of 23 countries around the world, 44 researchers, and we looked at this. And what we found was that, yes, self-compassion and receiving compassion from others actually mitigate, they buffer against the negative impact that the pandemic had on our mental health and social well-being. And these effects were consistent across all countries. What this means is that regardless of the levels of compassion, of depression, anxiety, stress that people had in these countries, regardless of these differences, this buffering effect of compassion was the same. And we found the opposite for fears of compassion. So basically, we found that fears of compassion, contrarily to compassion, actually magnified our vulnerability to be depressed, more anxious, more stressed out, and feel less connected to others in the context of the pandemic. And then we thought, what about trauma? What is the role of compassion and social connection in this experience of trauma throughout the pandemic? And we found that social connection, so feeling socially connected and compassion, actually they facilitated post-traumatic growth in this context, whereas social disconnection, on the contrary, increased vulnerability to post-traumatic stress. And then we also looked at how does compassion in such across this time during the pandemic, longitudinally, how do the flows of compassion change across countries? So we explored this, and we were very pleased to find that across multiple countries and nationalities, we found that across the pandemic, people became more compassionate towards themselves, more capable of receiving compassion from others, and less fearful of compassion for self and from others. So what I believe this shows us is that this provides evidence for this universal protective effect of compassion and social connection in promoting resilience and buffering against the negative impacts of such an adverse, threatening event such as the COVID-19 pandemic. But if compassion is universally protected, how did it evolve in us humans? So compassion is an innate, universal, pro-social motivation that we all share as human beings, and that has been central throughout our evolution as a species for us to survive and thrive. Yeah, that's compassionate Marcela superhero. And And Stan did these drawings. You can see there the heart by Stan Steindl. Yeah, and humans, unlike turtles, humans are not very much like turtles, are they? Because turtles, when they are born, how are turtles? They are born, they hatch from their eggs, right? Millions, I don't know millions, but maybe thousands of eggs. And then they hatch from the eggs with their brothers, little brothers and sisters, and they run out to the sea. Is there any mother turtle caring for them? No, not really, right? They are born alone and they run to the sea alone. And you know what happens? Only 98% of baby turtles actually become adult turtles. Most of them die, they are eaten by predators. But this doesn't really happen to humans, does it? Because baby humans, this is Clara, my daughter, when she was about 6 months old, I believe, like very cute baby humans, like turtles. But yeah, we are much different. We need to be cared for by others. Clara, when she was born, she couldn't feed herself by herself. She couldn't walk. She couldn't talk. She needed to be held, cuddled, loved, played with. So we are born as humans with this ability to care for other human beings, for not only for our offspring, but also for other humans around us. And this innate motivation to care for others actually evolved from our mammalian ancestors about 120 million years ago, thousands of years ago. And it came along with the fact that also baby mammals are born with an ability to ask for care from their parents, right? So if you look at the animal kingdom, we are born with this innate ability to ask for help, to ask for care from others. And a range of structures in our brain evolved for us to be sensitive to the care of others and to be physiologically regulated by the care of others. That's why when a baby is born, the first thing it recognizes is the mom's face, the mom's voice. It is soothed and calmed by his or her mom. But this motivation to care and be cared for also evolved in humans in the context of our life in social groups. So for us, as I was saying in the beginning, it is very important to belong, to appear attractive in the eyes of others. So we also evolved around about 5 million years ago, we also evolved this ability to actually detect in our larger social group if we were being accepted, and also this ability to care for others in the wider social group. So compassion evolves from the combination of this innate motivation that we have to care and be cared for by others with a set of unique human skills for social and emotional intelligence that involve this ability that we have to empathize, to be conscious and aware that we are conscious, and to have intentionality in our actions. You won't see a lion in the savannah thinking, how am I going to torture zebra, more efficiently, do we? We don't see lions do that, but we do as humans. And in the same way that we can apply that intentionality to a callous purpose, we can also use it to direct our compassionate motivation in an helpful way to address suffering. And our human mind is made of this, isn't it? It has these amazing abilities that bring us theater, music, this ability that we have to think creatively, anticipate the future, think about the past. The abilities that we have in our minds as human beings also come along with a lot of callousness and a lot of a huge downside that actually brings us depression, anxiety, stress, and makes us the only living being that tortures other living beings. It is responsible for the wars that we see happening. It is responsible for racism, for oppression, for inequality. So our minds hold this, we have these seeds inside of us. So my question is this: what are the seeds, the competencies in our minds, the powers that we want to cultivate and see flourish? Because, and before I move on to this, our minds, they operate very much like a garden. So in our minds, it will sprout, flourish and grow wherever we actually nurture and cultivate. Because we have a brain, there is plastic. And what this means is that we can train our brain and cultivate competencies in our brain that can change and transform our mental health and well-being and promote flourishing. And this is what compassion-based interventions have been doing, at least attempting to do. And so these intervention programs are specifically aimed at cultivating compassion for oneself and others have been developed and have been proved effective in improving well-being, health, psychophysiological regulation, and pro-social behavior. And a lot of studies are out there actually proving and demonstrating that these interventions are effective in improving our well-being and in reducing mental health difficulties. And so a lot of studies and research has been done on this, on cultivating compassion in different settings and populations. And here at University of Queensland, you are at the forefront of this endeavor. So you've been doing amazing work and showing that compassion-focused therapy, compassion mind training have a huge positive impact in a range of clinical and non-clinical populations, such as parents and children, ex-service personnel with PTSD and their partners, individuals with obesity, or adult female survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And in our research unit at CNAIC, University of Coimbra, we have also been trying to study this and looking at the impact of compassion-focused interventions on a range of clinical and non-clinical populations. For example, we have looked at adult and young offenders, caregivers, psychosis. So we have a lot of studies going on looking at the impact of compassion-focused interventions. And me, in my own work, I've been trying to pursue this as well. And I've been trying to develop, implement, and evaluate the efficacy of compassion-focused interventions, in particular, compassionate mind training on a range of populations, namely non-clinical populations, using a multi-method approach. And this is what I'm going to take you through now for a little bit, which is the studies that we've conducted. The first one, looking at how can we cultivate compassion for all. So here in this study, we developed a brief compassionate mind training intervention for the general public, and with this amazing team that I had to work with, and we looked at the impact of these just 2 weeks of cultivating and practicing compassion. What is the effect of that? So what we found is that these participants who completed a 2-week compassionate mind training, actually, they increased their levels of self-compassion and their ability to receive compassion from others. They decreased their fears of compassion. They increased their positive affect, so they felt more safer, more connected, more relaxed in the world. They decreased their levels of shame and self-criticism and reduced their symptoms of anxiety and their perceived stress. So we thought this was quite important, because it's just 2 weeks of practicing compassion exercises. So then we looked at a major physiological indicator of the activation of our parasympathetic system, which has been used a lot as a measure to evaluate the physiological impact of compassion. And we found that just 2 weeks of compassionate mind training actually improved participants' heart rate variability. So this physiological indicator of an adaptive response to stress, which is associated with adaptive emotion regulation and also higher levels of safeness-based positive emotions. And we also thought it would be important to understand actually what matters when you practice compassion. Is it how often you do the exercises? It is how you do the exercises? So what matters? So in the context of this study, we looked at practice quality, and we found that more than how frequently you practice formally compassion exercises, compassion focused imagery, soothing rhythm breathing, mindfulness, it is perceiving these exercises, this training as helpful to you, and especially being able to embody the compassion itself in everyday life and in moments of difficulty that are key to foster your compassionate self, your compassionate competencies, and reduce psychological distress. So along with encouraging a continued practice of compassionate mind training exercises, practitioners should highlight the importance and helpfulness of embodying and cultivating the compassionate self. So for the past 5 to 6 years, I've been dedicating most of my research work to cultivating compassion in schools. And this project has been conducted in collaboration with the University of Derby in the UK, and we've been basically developing, implementing, and evaluating the efficacy of compassionate mind training interventions for the school community. So we have interventions for teachers, non-teaching staff, pupils, and parents. And we've been studying the impact of these interventions on indicators of mental health, well-being, and biophysiological well-being as well, through a series of pilot and randomized controlled trials. And this is the amazing team that I have at the University of Coimbra that has been working with me on this project, and this is our amazing also UK research team, and also we have the collaboration of Nikki Petrocchi from Italy. And these are some of the inspiring teachers that came along to our trainings throughout these past 4 years. And so what did we find? So this first study explored the cross-cultural implementation efficacy of this compassionate mind training intervention for teachers. And we found that, both in Portugal and in the UK, we found that for the teachers, this compassion-focused intervention was useful, and it was found effective in these cross-cultural educational settings, not only in introducing and promoting a compassion-based school ethos, but also in cultivating psychological well-being for those working in education. Then, after a pilot study with 31 teachers, where we had very promising results in Portugal, we conducted a randomized controlled trial of this compassionate mind training intervention for teachers. And in this trial, we found that compassionate mind training for teachers is effective in promoting psychological well-being. It increases the flows of compassion in teachers, it increases feelings of relaxation, safeness, and connectedness to others. It promotes teachers' job satisfaction and life satisfaction. It promotes feelings of safeness, connection, and vitality in the workplace, decreases their self-criticism, reduces burnout, depression and stress, and also reduces feelings and responses of threats in the workplace. And we also found that these improvements were maintained at the 3-month follow-up. Here, we also looked at heart rate variability, and we also found that for the teachers who underwent the compassionate mind training interventions, they revealed significant improvements in heart rate variability. So this further corroborates this notion that compassionate mind training may produce an increase in vagal tone, which is associated with the downregulation of our physiological arousal in the face of stress and life challenges, and is also associated with the experience of interpersonal safeness and intrapersonal safeness, along with a greater capacity for emotion regulation, metacognitive awareness, and empathy. And recently, this is not published yet, submitted, but we have conducted in the UK, not in Portugal, but in the UK, a pilot study of the compassionate mind intervention for pupils. aged from 6 to 11 years old, and we found very promising results of the effect of the compassionate mind training for pupils in improving children's pro-social behaviors, the classroom environment, and in protecting against deteriorations in child mental health. So what are we doing now? So now, I am very excited about this work and very excited to present to you for the first time the results of this work. This is a new project that we started last year that is looking basically at extending this compassion in schools project, but evaluating the impact of this compassionate mind training intervention on neuroendocrine, autonomic, immunological biomarkers, and epigenetic mechanisms of prosociality and stress, along with exploring the impact on indicators of mental health and well-being. So we started this last year. We conducted one group with 36 teachers. So this is just the first group. And the teachers underwent these compassionate mind training interventions for 8 weeks. And before that time, so before the intervention, they were assessed twice to establish an intra-individual baseline. So they were assessed the first time, then 2 months afterwards, they did the intervention, and then they were assessed again after the intervention, and again 3 months afterwards. And in these assessments, we collected their blood, their saliva, we measured their heart rate variability while doing an experimental task, and they filled out a set of self-report questionnaires. So what did we find? You excited? I'm so excited. This is the first time I'm showing these results. So, in terms of the mental health and well-being, basically, we found our results corroborate what we had previously found in our RCT. We just used a few different measures, so we also found that this intervention promoted flourishing, which is a new measure that we introduced, and everything, and psychological flexibility, everything else, basically, we found the same effects. And we also found that these improvements were advanced or maintained at 3 month follow-up. Then we wanted to explore the impact of the intervention on immunological markers and the conserved transcriptional response to adversity gene expression. So we started with the impact of compassionate mind training on our, what we call, immune response profiling. So when we try to analyze our immune response profiling, we can look at different things. So we began to look at what we call most frequent populations of cells that are involved in the immune response. In this case, T cells, B cells, and natural killer cells. And what we found was that natural killer cells of the teachers who underwent the compassionate mind training intervention seemed to be decreased after the intervention, either at post-intervention. So it's these natural killer cells, we know that they are at the front line of the immune response and the innate immune response, and they correlate with effective response to infection, stress, and cancer. Then we were interested in this 53 gene signature that we call the conserved transcriptional response to adversity, which is a set of 53 genes formed by pro-inflammatory genes, type 1 interferon response genes, and genes related to the antibody synthesis. And all of these genes basically are related to our body's ability to respond to infections, cancer initiation processes, inflammation processes, bacteria, block viruses, and other infectious agents. So this is what we did. So we looked at, in relation to type 1 interferon response genes, what we found was that in the teachers that underwent the compassionate mind training intervention, we found a decreased expression of the genes associated with type 1 interferon response. And we believe that this might indicate a potential modulation of the immune system of these teachers after undergoing the intervention, because there seems to be a reduction in the systemic inflammation after the compassionate mind training intervention. We also looked at pro-inflammatory genes, in particular this gene, the CJUN, which is a transcription factor that is involved and very important in our cellular response to stress and inflammation. And we found a decreased expression of JUN after the compassionate mind training intervention, which might indicate that the development of compassion, motivation, and competencies may have a stress-reducing effect on teachers at the cellular level. Then we did some other very complicated things. And basically, this is a heat map, a clustering analysis of the set of 53 genes. And basically, what we can see here, and this is just very preliminary data, is that you can see the reds at M2 and M3 and the greens. So the reds, they sign an increase in the gene expression, and the greens sign a decrease in gene expression. And basically, what we found is that, as you can see, there is a pattern of increased expression in some of these genes, and also a pattern of decreased expression in other genes after the compassionate mind training intervention. So, these preliminary data, we believe that it suggests that these conserved transcriptional response to adversity genes seem to be able to identify changes obtained after a compassion-focused intervention. And so cultivating compassion using compassion mind training may have a positive impact on markers of the immune system associated with how our bodies respond to stress, infection, and cancer, as well as on reducing the expression of genes associated with our body's response to stress and inflammation. So next, we are going to do some more epigenetic analysis on DNA methylation of aging biomarkers, but also looking at the glucocorticoid receptor gene, which is associated with our stress response, and the oxytocin receptor gene associated with positive affiliative systems, prosociality, and affiliation. So, cultivating compassion can promote well-being and flourishing, reduce psychological distress and mental health difficulties, and have beneficial effects on physical health, improving autonomic physiological regulation and immune function, and impacting gene expression. So, that's why we need a compassion revolution. Because compassion provides the strength, the wisdom, and the courage to face suffering, seek to resolve conflicts, build empathic bridges, and strengthen cooperative relationships. And these are fundamental skills to face the threats that we are facing in today's world. The threats of climate change, systemic poverty, and worsening social inequalities. Cultivating compassion at different levels of complexity, from nations, organizations, communities to individuals, offers the pathways for the world we all seek to build. And throughout this journey, this personal and research journey, I experienced my own compassion revolution. And recently, my role as Clara's mom has really taught me about the importance of being compassionate. And I've learned so much throughout this process, and I've been trying to continuously develop my compassionate self, try to truly embody compassion in my life, in my relationship to myself, to others, and to be a model of compassion to my daughter, Clara. And in this trip, as you know, I've been here in Australia, a long way from home, and my compassionate self has been key to help me face and deal with the challenges, deal with being away from her, also helping to soothe her when she misses me. It has given me the courage and the encouragement that I need also to be here and be excited to be here, and also to accept other people's support and help and love and care. And because you have made me feel at home, so not yet. So, my question to you is this: how can you, in your own lives, harness this power of compassion that we all have within us, the seeds of compassion? How can you harness this power? How can you be more sensitive to the suffering within yourselves or in your outer world? And how can you develop the wisdom, the strength, the courage, the caring commitment to actually embody this superpower and transform your lives and the lives of those around you? Thank you very much.
I told you it was going to be great. And given the time, I think we might maybe just have one question. So whoever holds your hand up the highest, I'll bring the mic around. Would anyone like to ask one question before we finish off?
Hi, firstly, it was a lovely session. My question is around, when people struggle to be compassionate to their own selves, while a lot of it can, be traced to parents who are not compassionate to themselves and kids, parents who are very critical. Is there more to that, when people are unable to be compassionate to their own selves and struggle so much? Because sometimes it's like, if I'm compassionate to myself, I won't get stuff done, or, there's just, it can be very hard for some people to be kind to themselves. So, what else can, that you traced back to?
Thank you so much for that question. That's a very important question. It's all about these resistances. We all have resistances, fears, and blocks in different levels to compassion. And actually, what you are sharing is, we found in our research that fears of self-compassion and of receiving compassion from others are usually the ones that are more prominent amongst people. So in compassion-focused therapy, in compassion mind training, we not only seek to work with the facilitators of compassion, so to everything that actually helps you to develop these competencies within you, but also we work with the inhibitors, so with everything that hinders this ability that we have to cultivate compassion within us. So we would go and actually address these fears, blocks, and resistances, for example, to self-compassion. Does that make sense? Yeah? Thank you.
All right, well, I enjoyed so much that photo before that I thought I'd...
Yes, I wanted to do that as well.
Stand there and
Let's do a selfie, yeah.
No, I just think you... I'll stay out of this one.
I was going to do a selfie. I feel bad. I'm
Okay,
my back is to you.
Waving. Oh.
I don't want to be in the way.
It's good. Ready, waving, everyone. Great.
Thank you.
Well, once again, if we could just thank Dr. Marcela Matos. Thank you all for coming. We'll be hovering around for a few minutes if there's any other little questions, but otherwise, see you next year.
See you.